Alright, Book 3, or Volume 3, Bible Story by Arthur S Maxwell. We are at Part 3, Story 9, Gleaner Girl. It says, out of all the darkness and sadness of the days when Israel was ruled by the judges came one of the sweetest stories ever told. It is about a little girl called Ruth, who belonged to the Moabites, long-time enemy of Israel. As a child, I suppose she heard only bad things about the Israelites, and she might always have disliked them, but for the fact that she met Naomi. But for the fact that she met Naomi. Naomi was the mother of two boys about Ruth's age. One was called Malon, and the other one was called Chilon. Their father name was Elimelech, and the four of them had come all the way from Bethlehem to Moab because of a famine in their own country. After Elimelech's death, Ruth and Malon fell in love and married, and her girlfriend of Ruth's named Orpah married Selon. The five of them were happy together, for Naomi was the nicest mother-in-law any girl could wish to have. She loved her daughters-in-law dearly, and they loved her just as much. A godly woman, she was very sorry when her sons married heathen girls, but she made up her mind to lead them, if she could, to the love of the God of Israel. Taking every chance to tell them of God's love, she had heard the story that her parents long before had told them of how he created the world in the beginning and made it a beautiful home for man. Now Adam and Eve sinned and lost their garden home, and how God planned to give it back to them someday. She told them about the flood and the rescue of Noah and his family in the ark, of God's promise to Abraham in the dark days of Egypt and the dark days in Egypt, the dark deliverance in the days of Moses, and all that God had done for his people. Ruth and Orpah loved to listen to Naomi talk to them, and especially when she told of the wonderful things she believed God would do for Israel in the future. Someday she may have said, though some sweet girl, the seed of the woman would come to bruise the serpent's head. 10 years passed. Then trouble came, and great sorrow. First Melon died, then Ceylon, one after the other. The sadness in the home must have been terrible, with Ruth, Naomi, and Orpah all crying at once over the loss of their loved ones. Poor things. Yeah, I'm a widow right now. Poor things. How hard it must have been for them to believe in the goodness of God, but they did. Brave Naomi decided that she would go back to her old home in Bethlehem, and the two girls said that they would go with her. On the way, however, Naomi worried about them. She wondered whether she was doing the right thing in taking them away from their own country. Perhaps they would be better off if they were to go back to their own mothers, to their mothers. Go return each of you to Go return to your mother's house, she said to them kindly. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. Then she kissed them, and they all burst out crying again. Excuse me. But Ruth and Orpah said that they would rather stay with her than to go back into their homeland. They wouldn't leave her. They loved her so much. But Naomi said it was better that they should go back. They must find new husbands, she said, and would be easier to do this where they were known among their own people. They talked for a long time about it, and then Orpah decided that maybe Naomi was right. So she said goodbye with many tears and went back home. I can see her waving her last farewells before fading from sight around a bend of the road. But Ruth wouldn't go. Instead, she said to Naomi in words, and here's a picture of them. And these are women walking out of the country by themselves back to a different place. But Ruth wouldn't go. Instead, she said to Naomi in words that will live forever, entreat me not to leave thee. And then a pause. For where thou goest, I shall go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God will be my God. And then now that song in my head by Carmen. It's I Will Go. And you only can find it on um Yo Kids. It's the song, it's on there. I can't remember if it's the first one or the second one, but I know it's on Yo Kids. I think it's on the first one, because what I got in there, I got Yo Kids 1, but it's in Yo Kids 2 box. Confusing. Okay, let me get back to the story. So Naomi and Ruth went on their way together, trotting slowly and sadly up the rough, steep mountain trail that led them to Bethlehem. When they came at last to an ancient village, there was great excitement. Naomi's back, the people cried, gathered crowd around her, around to hear the news she brought from the land of the Moab. But where is your husband? They said, and where are the boys? Tearfully she told the story. She went out full of the Lord, and the Lord had brought her home again empty. Fortunately, the bravest harvest. Wait. Okay, let me rewind. Okay. Fortunately, the barley harvest was beginning, so there was work to be done and food to eat. Ruth at once offered to go into the fields and glean with the other village girls. In those days, grain was cut and gathered by hand. and what was left by the reapers had to be picked up by the gleaners. One day, as she was busy at work, Boaz, the owner of the field, came by. Seeing a strange girl among the gleaners, he stopped and asked who she is. The man in charge replied, "She is a Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab." Boaz was interested. He had wanted to meet her, especially since Naomi was was a relative of his. Calling Ruth to him, he told her he had heard of all her kindness to Naomi, and now he is willing, and how she is willingly left on her own country to come and live among strangers. The Lord comprise the Lord recompense thy work, and full reward is given to thee of the Lord God, under whose wing thou art come to trust. There's also a movie. It's from about the same time that this book was made, and uh, it clicks into it. So they probably did use some of this story in there. I know it's called Ruth, and it's got Jerome, which is supposed to be a Saint Jerome, and I like the story. I had it. I wished I had it again. It was on DVD. Uh, that's how old I had it. It was on No, it was on VHS. That's right. Okay. All right, let me get back into the story. Smiling sweetly, Ruth thanked him for his gracious words. And this has his name is very clear on here. Russ Harlow. And it looks like a painting. Yeah, it looks like an oil painting. It's a 2-pager. And there it is. And Boaz is talking and finding out who she is. And that's what he said. Now, granted, if you watch the story, you might not like some of the stuff in it. It's an older movie. Uh, they actually give her a, a story. They give Ruth a story, then goes into the thing. Okay? Smiling sweetly, Ruth thanked him for his generous words, and Boaz was very pleased with her. Told her, told the reapers to let some of the sheaves drop where she could glean them, so that she would have lots of grain to take home to Naomi. As days went by, Boaz and Ruth saw more and more of each other, and one day there was a wedding in Bethlehem. It was it must have been at quite an event, for Boaz was very rich, and Ruth was very poor, and a Moabitess too. The people must have been talking for weeks, and they would have talked still more if they had known what would come of all of it in all the years ahead. For Ruth and Boaz had a son named Obed, and Obed had a son named Jesse, and Jesse had a son named David. Sorry. So Ruth, dear, kind, faithful Ruth, was the great-grandmother of King David and the great-great-grandmother of King Solomon, and the direct ancestor of Joseph, husband of Mary, who, 1,000 years later, in the self-same village of Bethlehem, gave birth to the baby Jesus. Sorry. Ugh, that gets me all the time. And Ruth, I'm sure Ruth never dreamed so great an honor would be hers when, away in her native Moab, she listened. Okay, let me clear my eyes for a second. I'm sure Ruth never dreamed so great an honor would be hers when, all the way from her native Moab, she listened to Naomi telling the wonderful stories of the God of Israel, and the God of heaven and earth. How glad she would be through all eternity that she gave her heart to him then. And then, of course, it has a picture of Ruth and Obed, because Obed became was became Naomi, uh, even though he was her grandson. But there they are. Okay, sorry for the tears. Alright, that was the end of part 3. Now we're going to get to into our next part. And I'm going to take a break. And I don't know how many stories we got. Ooh, didn't realize it was torn. But we just got a little bit to go. And we'll be through with this. And we'll start on our next book. But let's get this going first. Okay, got to take a break.